welcome to India Tonight with me, Ankur Mishra, and my co-host Sumita Karir, who's joining from the field just for this show. Let's get started with the debate. Government has now made Sanchar Saathi mandatory for every mobile user in India. It says this is the shield we urgently need against alarming surge in cyber fraud. SIM cloning and digital identity theft that is hitting lakhs of citizens every single month. But as this powerful tool rolls out worldwide, a large faction is pushing back. The argument is, moment the state begins to verify every device and trace every connection, the line between security and surveillance becomes dangerously thin. And there are serious questions now being asked. How much access will government get to our personal digital lives? What checks and balances will ensure this system is not misused? And what happens to privacy when the platform built to protect us can potentially track us? But to demystify, to allay all the concerns, we have with us a important quote which has come in from Minister of Communications Jyotiraditya Scindia, who said that this is not mandatory. Let's listen into what he had to say.
कॉल मॉनिटरिंग है, अगर आप चाहते हो तो इसको आप एक्टिवेट करो, अगर आप नहीं चाहते तो इसे एक्टिवेट मत करो। सुनिए ना, अगर आप इसको अपने फोन पे रखना चाहते हो तो रखो, अगर आप इसको डिलीट करना चाहते हो तो डिलीट करो। जिस तरीके से, उदाहरण के तौर पे, आपके फोन पे जब आप फोन खरीदते हो तो उस पे कई ऐप्स आ जाती हैं, जैसे गूगल मैप्स भी आ जाता है। अब आपको गूगल मैप इस्तेमाल नहीं करना है तो आप डिलीट कर लो, अगर आपको संचार साथी इस्तेमाल नहीं करना है तो डिलीट कर दो।
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Union Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia speaking about this, Sanchar Saathi move and, of course, how it's going to impact citizens. And, of course, he's giving the clarification that's coming in from the government at this point in time. But let's also go across to my colleague Charu, who's joining us with fresh updates. Charu, so we've also seen what the Telecom Minister has essentially spoken about this controversy. And, of course, there's a whole new angle to this controversy that has developed. And that is essentially about how much will the government eventually end up spoofing, how much surveillance can citizens really allow, but what is the latest that you're picking up?
So while we are looking at two sides here, the government side and the consumer side, the side of the public, there is also the industry side, right? There are a lot of companies, the mobile providers who are also involved in the entire thing. So we have come to know that Apple has decided to go up to the government to talk about the order that they came out with on November 28th, that said that all the mobile providers and makers have to have this app installed in the device within 90 days. Now, what is happening is that Apple is deciding to go up to the government to sort of negotiate and find a solution in a way that benefits both the consumers and the government as well as the industry, because in the current format, they are not really able to accommodate this, and that is why more conversation has to take place.
That is a valid point which has been raised by different factions, but to discuss what actually will be the impact, whether or not it is hinging on our privacy. NS Nappinai, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, as well as Nikhil Pahwa, founder MediaNama, is joining us on this debate. Welcome, gentlemen. First, I want to come to you, Mr. Nappinai, and legality is now something which will be a point of debates. But what are the legal safeguards needed when a platform like Sanchar Saathi becomes mandatory for every user in the country?
Well, firstly, it's not Mr. Nappinai, as you can see, but moving forward, see, there is a basic fallacy in what the minister is saying itself. The issue here is not about my right to delete an app. The issue is about whether I want to download the app in the first instance. That choice of whether I need a particular service or not, and that too in my own personal device, should rest with me. It should not be forced down my throat, and definitely not by the government. The government stands on a different footing from corporates who may or may not preload their apps. So that's the first issue. The second issue is what the minister is saying is directly contrary to what the direction that has been issued by the department states. it clearly states that you cannot remove or tamper with the app. And if that is the case, and now you're taking a different stand, my earnest advice and request to the ministry will be, please delete this direction, reset it, and go back to first evaluating one, what is feasible and infeasible, two, what do we as users want and need, and three, what is the constitutional right to force the inclusion of a government app in personal mobile devices. Only after this evaluation is done can the government move forward, if at all, in formulating a process which can ensure our safety but without intruding on our privacy and our personal rights.
Ms. Nappinai, you've made some very, very valid points, and in fact, we've interacted with you in the past over some of these matters. But let me also take the conversation forward with Nikhil Pahwa, and let me bring in Nikhil on this aspect. Nikhil, how do you really assess this entire debate about why should the government have so much of access to what I watch on my phone, to my contact list, to my messages, to my camera and other entertainment apps? I mean, it's a different thing that Jyotiraditya Scindia has given out a clarification. He's given out a bite and has essentially stated that you can delete the app. But the argument, the debate is not really about deleting the app, but why was it conceived in the first place? Why should I be forced to install an app I don't want?
Well, I think you'll have to ask the ministry that, because it does create a massive privacy problem. It's also a question, like Nappinai said, that this is a private app, it's a personal app, it's where we have our most vulnerable conversations. It's where, for example, I share my health reports with my doctor for a quick feedback. These are all things we don't go and broadcast in public and show it around or put it on social media. So it's where we are vulnerable, even and especially for example, journalists and politicians who have sensitive conversations. This can be a major problem, because they are most vulnerable to political activity from the government, right? Um, but apart from all of that, this creates a security vulnerability. This app on your device becomes a single point of failure if a billion handsets in India have it. If someone has to get access to our devices, they just hack one app then to get that access. And this is going to be installed at an operating system layer, which is far more powerful with far more permissions. The regulation clearly say that it cannot be disabled, it cannot be restricted, which means its permissions cannot be restricted, which means that it can't be deleted, even though the minister is saying otherwise. So like Nappinai said, I completely agree. If they have to show that if the minister, if they have to go by what the minister has said, this particular regulation will have to be removed. And I think the Department of Telecommunications has to stop issuing these kinds of directives without a proper public consultation, because of the impact that it has. There is another SIM binding regulation that they've issued on Friday, out of the blue, with no conversation, no public consultation, forcing us to link our social media accounts, our WhatsApp accounts, our Telegram accounts with the SIM that we have on our device, which also stops other kinds of usage. Department of Telecom should not be regulating anything related to the internet. They're a telecom ministry. They should work with your Airtel and Jio and all the ISP and telecom companies. They don't have the history, the understanding, or even the openness that Ministry of Electronics and IT has. Even though MeitY also makes mistakes, but no one is as bad as this in terms of running an ecosystem which impacts our fundamental right to privacy and speech so significantly. So I'm very, very disappointed with how this has happened, and I wish the Prime Minister steps in and makes sure that DOT doesn't get involved in trying to regulate the internet.
For once, let's think that government in all good intentions is going to bring this kind of an app. But Ms. Nappinai, I want to understand from legal point of view, is India's existing data protection regime strong enough to support device level verification without risking privacy?
Now, firstly, there is an assumption that there is a data protection framework still. You have to remember that ultimately, after 2 years of waiting, we finally have the data protection rules notified, and the rules mandate an 18-month wait further ahead for us before the substantive provisions will come into play. But having said that, even looking forward beyond 18 months, if we keep in mind the fact that the state is also a person and therefore regulated under the Data Protection Act, it's critical that the government understands that it is also mandated to protect our personal data. By making a statement as a clarification to say that the Sanchar Saathi app does not collect personal data still does not clarify what kind of data it is actually collecting. Is it claiming that it is only collecting anonymized data? For if it says that it can find my phone, how is it doing it without my location data? So we talked about the consent framework in the first part. Let me emphasize the accountability framework, which is also a criticality for data protection laws. So when we speak about accountability framework, how it works with the ministry is a government entity is expected to answer to what is the responsibility they are extending when they initiate action like this towards protection of individual rights and, more importantly, protection of our fundamental rights. When you have a process which itself says that I will force entities which are regulated by me to install an app, but the ultimate victim is the end user. The end user is not regulated by this ministry. And this action definitely impacts my fundamental rights as an Indian citizen and a user of a mobile device, which is my private property in India. So when you're formulating laws or regulations, please keep in mind the three basic pillars of parliament enacted law, legitimate aim, and proportionality. This does not take any three of these categories. This is a direction that is under a rule which itself is delegated legislation, which draws its right from a parent act. So you have three layers of delegation here, and that itself is likely to impact the sustainability of this direction.
Absolutely, Ms. Nappinai. And Mr. Pahwa, let me also ask you, the government in its defense has essentially stated in the readout that was issued late last night, it said that it wants to combat spam calls, it wants to combat fraud, and of course, it wants to protect users. I mean, if we really sort of play the devil's advocate here as well, how do you really look at that sort of clarification which is coming in from the government and that it's looking at protecting users? Now, when it comes to protecting users with respect to spam calls and all, there is an app called Chakshu as well. How much has that app been able to do in terms of protecting the interests of users and, most importantly, the data of users as well? Or is this a case of misplaced priorities?
Look, it is the government's responsibility to make sure that spam and scam gets addressed. But is this the only possible way of basically installing an app that has the ability to scan all our devices and forcing it on everyone? So to catch some scammers, which, by the way, according to reports, are based in villages in different parts of India. Some of them employ thousands of people in these scams. Uh, shouldn't there be police work to stop scammers? And if it's coming from outside the border, is this the only way to do it, by compromising our privacy or forcing us to install an app like this? I think there has to be some level of thinking around proportionality here. You know, that is this the best possible mechanism for it? I certainly don't think so. And there is no silver bullet to doing this. But I understand the scale of the fraud that exists, and that scale of the fraud exists because our data is being spread around forcefully by the government, right? We're forced to link our Aadhaar to everything. We're forced to share our data everywhere we go. The government is creating more and more IDs. The more data there is out there, and let's not forget, most of these scams are social engineering. It becomes easier to do social engineering. How will you stop that? So if SIM cards are being issued by the thousands, then where is the responsibility of the telecom operators to not issue those SIM cards. So I mean, there's a limitation that you can only have eight mobile numbers per user. Fair enough. Then how are thousands of SIM cards being sold like this, right? To a single entity, where call centers are full, they're giving like awards for most scams. This has all been reported. So is this the only solution? I don't think so. Is there a better solution? I'm not sure, but it can't be forcing us to compromise with our privacy and give up more of our data. You know, just today, the UIDAI has launched an app that makes it, according to them, easier to share your Aadhaar data. But why do we have to share our Aadhaar data in the first place all the time? So this is the mess of the government's creation. Now they're expecting us to compromise more with our privacy to try and stop it. I don't think that should be allowed.
Point well taken. With authority, there comes also responsibility. But a bigger question is, should a mandate of this scale come from Parliament, which is currently underway, and it could have been done through executive rather than administrative directions, which has been done till now?
I honestly don't think so, because Parliament can't go around making laws on every small instance like this, right? The executive has a responsibility to try and prevent the scams. I'm just saying putting malware on our devices is not the solution here. And maybe this is not the best ministry to do it. And maybe we need to do a public consultation and get more views from a broader set of people to understand what are the best mechanisms to prevent spam and scam. And that is better coming from, I would say, the Ministry of Electronics and IT that understands how we use digital better.
Right. Absolutely. They need to understand digital better, as well as have consultations, wide-ranging consultations with industry members, with other ministries as well. In fact, Nikhil, what we're given to understand is that there was no consultation that was done with the IT ministry, with the MIT ministry, and of course, both of these ministries are interlinked. But let me ask you, Ms. Nappinai, in terms of what companies are looking at, what businesses are looking at, we're given to understand from industry sources, from sources within Apple, within Samsung, who are mulling the next move, but they're not completely happy with how the government has sort of rolled out this directive. How do you look at the position that they're going to undertake with respect to what's happened in the rest of the world as well, in similar cases concerning these companies?
Yeah, so I wanted to intervene earlier, so I'll make a very quick point and then answer your question. It's right that you don't need Parliament law for everything, but there is a delegated authority, which is the rule-making authority, and therefore, if you're going to bring out something this critical, then the rule-making authority is ideally where you place these kind of directives. On that note, one further problem that everybody seems to be confusing in this issue is, do we want protective measures to protect us against scams? Of course we do. Is the Sanchar Saathi a good product? Probably. Is it really helping alleviate the problems for scam victims? Maybe. But the issue here is not all these things. The issue is, should it be mandatory for it to be installed in all our phones? That's where the no comes in. So knowing and delineating these two issues are critical. And that brings me to question on corporates not being happy. Naturally, they won't be, because they are being made to not just change their architecture, not just do something that they may not be comfortable with doing, but critically, what they are being asked to do is modify or include within their proprietary software a software which is neither tested nor owned by them, but technically a third-party software.
Right.
If the software is going to harm or
that is
vulnerabilities,
why companies like Apple have raised concern about encryption and device identifier. I want to understand, legally, do they have some kind of ground to move to courts?
Certainly. Companies have a ground, individuals would have a ground, and therefore it is okay that the government has already come out with this directive, but it's not too late for them to retract, review, and then come out with a better proposal.
Right, so come out with a better proposal is essentially what you're stating, Ms. Nappinai. But taking that point across to you, Mr. Pahwa, what could a better proposal really look like, wherein the government could look at balancing the priorities with respect to spam calls, with respect to all of these frauds that are happening, with respect to digital arrest, as at the same time protecting the interests of consumers as well?
So look, there is no silver bullet to this problem. If there was, it would have been found already. The fact is a large number of things need to be done, and we need to have a national level consultation, not just involving industry. Because honestly, I'll be very frank, the telecom operators don't know how the internet gets used. Every company thinks that it has the solution to the problem, and everyone's just pushing for more identity, more linkages, more binding. We need to basically open it up to the best ideas possible and do a broader public consultation on this issue of fraud and figure out how we can build trust and safety in our communications. That broader approach doesn't exist. And I'm afraid the government is not the best entity to come and try and figure it out for itself, because it's very distanced from how most people use the internet, from how younger people use the internet. And we've seen that in laws and regulations that it's not well placed. It also needs to be open to inputs from civil society, which has completely stopped. And to the extent that ministries like DOT feel that they can do whatever they want without any transparency, accountability, or public consultation. There was, for example, a consultation a few months ago on the MVN, on the TIUE directive, under which this particular directive has come. That's the rule. But the submissions that were made to them under TIUE have never been made public, and they refuse to make them public. They keep refusing inputs, access to inputs to journalists like us on RTI, and DOT is not the only one. Ministry of Information and Broadcasting refused it under the broadcast bill also. We need the government to be more transparent about what's going on, because that's the only way we can find a better solution and identify whether they've done the best thing possible or not. Right now, even the public consultations that happen are just for show. And that's not the right way that a democracy should function.
Transparency and accountability is the key. But as you were talking about solutions, how do other large markets tackle stolen or cloned phones without creating similar privacy concerns?
I don't think any market has as big a problem as us, because, like I said, our government has published a lot of our personal data, or forced sharing of a lot of our personal data. You'll remember that about 10 years ago, there used to be government departments that used to publish first name, last name, number, mobile number, address, father's name, mother's name, all sorts of information in Excel sheets which were indexed on Google search. So there's so much of leakage of data that's happened from the government itself. Remember Rasna Khera's story for the Telegraph, where Aadhaar database access was being sold for 500 rupees. So the government has been irresponsible in how it's handled data. Our problems are very different from anywhere else in the world, because our government has created such a large problem through its own irresponsible handling of data. By just forcing more data collection, more data leakages are not going to stop. We need to have a data minimization policy.
But the last word I want to take from you, Nappinai, what should be the next course of action by government, or do you see this going to courts?
I truly hope that we do not have to keep rushing to court for each and everything. There has to be not just clarifications, but a modification to the direction, and ideally under the rules itself, in terms of what the government wants. As long as it understands that if the issue is that Sanchar Saathi is a good option for users to avail of for protecting their own rights, then leave it to the users to opt for it. If you're still going to insist on an installation, there has to be an opt out. It cannot be mandatory, because don't you see how illogical it is? Forget about the new phones that you're going to get. They also mandate that the software update should intrinsically include in it the implementation or inclusion of this app. So effectively what the minister is saying is I have to mandatorily download the app and then decide that I will delete it, and thereby allow that app to leave its digital footprint, collect data about me as a user, including the kind of phone I use, where I use it from, and who am I and what am I using it for, and then delete. Why do I have to compromise my data to that effect? And of what relevance is it when you say that I can always delete or not register, when you're forcing the first step in terms of the app being included in my personal device? So, this kind of a status is definitely not going to stand the test of judicial review. And therefore, again, I would say that if wisdom prevails, the government, it's not too late. The government can definitely relook it. Otherwise, I am looking at a flurry of litigations landing in court.
All right, Ms. Nappinai and Ms. Pahwa, it's time for us to close this debate, but definitely it's a very, very important aspect that's been brought up, by activists, of course, privacy activists and lawyers like yourselves in the past couple of hours. We do hope the government pays heed and is not really looking at providing any knee-jerk reactions in future. And there are proper consultations with industry members, with business houses, and of course with other ministries as well. If privacy of the individual and protection of the right of the individual, that is something that the government is prioritizing. But for the moment, thank you very much, ma'am.